Yeah. So the title of the presentation is Small Code Shared Work, a Minimal Computing Approach to Linguistic Sovereignty in Transliterated Texts. And I'll go throughout the presentation, I'll deal with each of these keywords and each of these phrases that I've used. I'll go all the way from why small code and shared work, why minimal computing approaches, and how linguistic sovereignty is therefore transliterated texts. So the problem with DH tools in general is that whenever you're building a DH tool and you want to reach, let's say, a larger audience, you're a researcher, you're a tool builder, a lot of it relies on the linguistic aspect of it all, right? We use keyword analysis, we use a lot of tokenization. So linguistics plays a big part of it, right? Now, when you're building a tool and you want to reach a large audience, there's no problem in using, let's say, going for a dominant language. Let's say we use English, right? Or we use, let's say, like French or German or any of these languages. And there's no inherent problem in that. Now, but for somebody like Google, right, you have these big players in the industry and they support translations. Google Translation is one of the biggest, if not the biggest in the world. In the context of India, they support Urdu and Tamil, but not Kashmiri, right? And all three of these languages are recognized by the same schedule of the Indian Constitution. So that's something that piqued my interest as somebody who researches in Kashmiri, Anglophone Kashmiri literature and all of its corpus. So clearly, minority language is excluded, in one way by the researchers that build them for better or worse reasons, but especially even by dominant players. So what gets lost, right? In the process of making a tool, let's say you're building an algorithm to detect language in a text, you're doing some sort of ML algorithms, you're doing perhaps AI detection. All these tools require normalization. It's a sort of a standard procedure, right? You have noise, you standardize the complexity of a language to make it easier for the algorithm to work through it. But for minority languages that already are not there upfront and are already overcome by the domineering other languages, this normalization is not neutral, right? It's a structural erasure, right? The complexity of the language can be easily lost, especially that it's not represented as well in the first place. So an example here is three transliterated spellings of the Kashmiri word for apple. And they're all correct. They're dialectically distinct. And on normalizing process, one way that it would be normalized would be whenever you see apple, you pick one of them and you have apple translated, but it's fine, right? But all three of them going from left to right represent different regions of Kashmir. So people in Kashmir, depending on their region, call apple in these three, at least the ones I could find, distinct ways. So that's something that normalization or the general way that these tools start their foundation from in terms of linguistic exposure, these things will be lost in translation, essentially. So another example here, and it's more nuanced, it raises the stakes even more. Take a common word like mother, right? So in multiple transliterated forms, you see the three, they look very similar. And once I went through these three as well, even as a native speaker myself, on first instance, I could not tell the difference. Oh, they're all the same, perhaps. But what I recognized by reading over and over again all these three words here, that the subtle vowel shifts mean that perhaps they could be pronounced differently and the meaning would change. So the text could have these subtleties that would be missed. So how do we make sure that we don't miss what matters when building tools or when trying to represent languages that are, let's say, marginalized, underrepresented, right? So this brings me to linguistic sovereignty, the decision-making process, right? So sovereignty, what is that, right? In terms of linguistics, the right of a language community to define their own language, right? Linguistic identity is important to a community, so they should be able to define it for themselves. Now, the tools that auto-normalize decide for the community, right? They essentially decide for them, okay, this is what it means, right? It removes the right, the sovereign right of that community on their own language. The variation in accents and dialects and spellings, it's all crucial data for interpretation. To quote Gabby Krylov, right, computation is context. So when we get computationally using DH tools, all these words, right, these slight variations that may be missed, right? These are crucial for interpretation, right? So sovereignty Linguistic sovereignty must be practiced in the process, not just claimed in principle that a tool is supposedly, let's say, on this principle, it does support the community, so on and so forth. So what does the process look like? The one solution that I came up with was a minimal open source extractor named very non-creatively as word extractor. It's completely open source, and I've put it up on Streamlit for anybody to use. It is under 150 lines. And in fact, this includes all the comments, all the explanations of how things are working, and the Streamlit interface itself. So the code that actually does let's say the bulk of the processes behind the scenes is actually less than 100 lines and is fully open source. Now, currently, it has two modes. One is non-English. So essentially what happens is that in the back end, you have an open source dictionary, English dictionary, it checks it, and it surfaces non-English candidates. And I've chosen that term quite consciously, and I'll get to it in a moment. The other option is of the Kashmiri one. Since I was working on Kashmiri, I know that there are approximate languages like Urdu and Hindi in India that share vocabulary. So I use open source word list of Urdu and Hindi to exclude non-Kashmiri vocabularies present and surface better in terms of the candidate list towards the output. And this whole process is adaptable to any transliterated minority language subsumed within a dominant one. And I'll get to this point in a moment. So how does it work? Essentially getting to the point. This on the right side of the slide is essentially the program, right? Yes, it can be contained even simpler, right? It can contain with a better function, perhaps better libraries or what have you. However, it's a simple if-else filtering system for a very, conscious, it was a very conscious decision to use this, right? So that's readable, especially because it's Python, it's more readable than other languages. So even to non-coders, you can explain them quite simply how to utilize their own language. So how does it work? In the screenshot that I've taken here of the code base that's available on GitHub, E-words is essentially the English dictionary that I've taken, the open source English dictionary. C-words are constrictions because dictionaries usually do not include constrictions like aren't or you are, so on and so forth, right? So it makes the filtering process a bit better. And it's deliberately not an algorithm. There's no black box, there's no opaqueness, the code is right there. Simple if-else filtering system. Whatever you want to filter from the dominant language, you replace the dictionary with that language, right? And assuming that you have certain minority language subsumed within it, once you go through the filtering, those candidate lists come through. So the code is intentionally elaborate. Each function is visible, it's replaceable, it's easily teachable. So what I call this whole phenomenon, why it's structured in this way, why is it candidates, how does it detect, does it not do it automatically? I call it intentional precision. The candidate list, right? The output is not a result. And I've used it again very consciously. It's a candidate list, right? In one example, a 100,000 word text, I got around 500 candidate Kashmiri words. Now, what happens with that candidate list, right? This is where shared work comes through. The list goes to native speakers, researchers, and community members for review. We eventually use all these lists of words for annotation purposes. It gets fed into AI systems to become better at translation for that language, right? So that list, that candidate list, goes through the native speakers, the researchers in a circle, right? Constant reviewing between these. This is where shared work comes through. So accuracy, the accuracy emerges from shared labor, not automated certainty. And this is important for minority languages, again, due to the issues of representation, right? So shared work as method. The native speakers determine, for example, in my case, is this Kashmiri? Is this variation meaningful or incidental, right? The community decides. In the Apple example that I gave, it was a dialect shift, right? In the example of the word mother that I gave, it has potential different meaning depending on the emphasis, right? And it can show you layers of texts. But these instances have to be recognized by this method. You go through the whole process, right? You upload your text, you get candidate list, you go through the shared work as method process, and you get a resulting list that you can annotate and further improve upon. So the curation becomes a collective scholarly act. The process is the point. Sovereignty is practiced in deciding, not just extracting, right? This is where linguistic sovereignty comes through. So to conclude, essentially, is to build small and build together. right? DH tools for minority languages must be small, open, and community informed. And this is not to say that big softwares can't be made. This is in the sense from based on the principle of minimal computing, right? It's easier to teach because I mean there are so many languages that are yet to have come through into the community. So this has to be of importance. And variation is not noise, especially for already marginalized languages. And especially since minimal computing lowers the barrier to entry. It runs on any device. It's easily readable by beginners, especially if it's written in Python. And the workflow then extends to any transliterated or under-resourced language if you just swap out the dictionaries for yourself. So in principle, sovereignty lies in the process, not just the output. Thank you very much.